Okay, so with our second topic in this unit, it's called revenue. There's actually a little bit more information that we're going to need to really wrap our minds around with this topic, and I've gone ahead and given you the most of the notes here for revenue. I am going to talk through them a little bit to provide you with a little bit of context for what we're seeing here, and then at the bottom of this page is a table, and it allows us to kind of explore some of the questions about revenue. So at the heart of revenue is understanding that this is really defined as the amount of money that's really coming into the firm. That's all that revenue really is. And we've already learned total revenue is really, kind of, we'll put this up here, total revenue is equal to the price times the quantity, right? And that's the amount that the firm gets to sell times the price that they sell the items for. And so what we really are, though, focused on in this class is going to be a little bit more about profit. And understanding profit is really the key for firms and the theory of the firm and supply. They care about total revenue to an extent, but they're really concerned with maximizing profit. So we have to focus in on that for a moment. So profit, sometimes abbreviated with a capital pi, that's actually what that is, so it's a little hard to see. It's the Greek letter pi capitalized. It's actually just total revenue minus total cost. So TR minus TC equals profit, right? That's all that is. And accountants and economists are going to define total revenue generally as quantity sold times the price. So we have that kind of up here. Now, in order to figure out the other piece of this, right, if we figure out total revenue, we have to figure out total cost. We have to talk about what costs are. So there are two kinds of costs. And in this class, we're going to be concerned with both kinds. Now, accountants are only going to be concerned with one kind, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But really, there are two kinds of costs, and we're going to care about both. The first are explicit, right? Explicit, and those involve outlays of money. So this would be like money exiting your wallet, right? Literally money leaving, right? This is money exiting your wallet. Those are the actual outlays of money. Implicit costs are foregone benefits. Those are not things that you're actually directly spending money on, but they're things that you're giving up. They're the opportunity costs. And we're going to care about those in this class. So thinking about it, like if we're thinking about the resources that we're employing, we could alternately use capital resources to create income for a firm. We could rent them out to someone else. So for example, if we weren't operating our paper chain factory, we could rent out our scissors and stapler to another company and we could actually make money that way. So that's an implicit cost, right? We didn't do it, so that's foregone benefits. We also have alternate costs or alternate uses of our time and effort to create income. So for example, in making these videos, I am foregoing the benefit of doing something else that might generate me income. And so there's an implicit cost involved in me doing this task. So in many questions you're going to get asked, what are the implicit costs? Those are not ones where they involve money exiting your wallet. Explicit, right? Explicit. But they are important costs to be aware of. Now, accountants and economists, I just said, kind of define costs a little differently. For accountants, right, and many of your parents are accountants and you're studying to be accountants, is just total revenue, defined the same way, minus just the total explicit costs. And sometimes something called depreciation, which I'll talk about in a second. Economic profit, though, is going to be total revenue minus the total explicit cost minus the total implicit cost. So the difference between the two, right, is that if accounting profit is positive, then we know that economic profit could be positive, or economic profit could be zero, or it could be negative. That's because the economic profit is subtracting out this second item. So that second item. Now, if we knew that economic profit were zero, right, if we knew that all of that equaled zero, then actually we know that this is a positive value. Because if we don't include the implicit cost, then we know that this number, the top accounting profit, has to be positive. Now, sometimes this is going to be included in questions, depreciation. It's the decreasing value of capital. And the idea is that every year that you have a capital expenditure, or rather a capital good, like a factory, that it deteriorates just a little bit, right? You've got to build in maybe the cost of a new roof, or you've got to build in the cost of replacement for that capital unit. And so what accountants will often do is they'll say, we can subtract total revenue, total explicit cost, and then we'll build in something called depreciation. So we'll say, if it takes 10 years every 10 years you have to replace the roof, and the roof costs $10,000 to replace, then every year we're going to set aside $1,000 of value that we're going to depreciate, because we know that in the 10th year that's going to be a big cost that we're going to have. So they sometimes will do this thing called depreciation. So it involves kind of spreading out the value of your capital in terms of a replacement. Now, in this class, we're going to really focus on economic profit. There's a possibility you're going to get questions about accounting profit, but economic profit is really when we talk about profit, what we're looking at. Now, normal profit. This is a key idea. Economic profit of 0 is known as normal profit. So if you had a normal, right, air quotes, normal situation, that would actually mean that you're earning an economic profit of 0. Economic normal profit implies the firm is covering its explicit cost and is generating a positive accounting profit, and it's compensating for the opportunities given up. So in other words, that there aren't any better opportunities out there. If the economic profit were negative, then the firm is doing something that it shouldn't be. It actually should be switching out and doing the thing that would provide it more economic profit, that would reduce its implicit costs. So we would often say that it's a normal situation for a firm to earn 0 economic profit. And we should know that even though an accountant would look at that and go, yeah, but the company's earning money, we'd say, of course, yeah, they're earning a positive accounting profit. But a normal economic profit means we're kind of covering both of our explicit and implicit costs. Now, all of that is there to say that we then are really concerned with how do we maximize profit? Given all of that being true, like how do we make the most? Even if the normal situation is 0, then how do we get to 0 if we're in a negative number? Or how do we get the most profit possible? So let's recall first that profit is just total revenue minus total costs. And both of those two things are functions of a quantity of output. So for example, as the quantity rises, both total revenue should rise and TC should rise. Now this is in general true, that these things end up being true. And let's assume we have this oil company called Apex. Apex is going to make its decision about how much to produce on a marginal basis. In other words, not like should we just produce 50 barrels or 20 barrels. It's going to say should we produce the next barrel. To know it, it's going to have to know whether the additional revenue outweighs the additional cost of generating that unit. So we're going to think on the margin here in order to maximize profit. And the idea here is we figure out the additional revenue, the marginal revenue, and we figure out the additional cost, the marginal cost. These are given here for you as change in total revenue divided by the change in quantity of output. Right? Change in quantity of output. And total cost, change in total cost divided by change in quantity of output. So again, these are the changes, right? It's very important that we kind of observe them. At MR equaling MC, profits maximized. That's the optimal output rule. And this is maybe one of the most important things in microeconomics, is MR equals MC. You produce at that quantity where the MR equals the MC. And that's actually going to tell us where the profit's maximized. Now, sometimes you find that quantity and you realize, darn, that's actually still not a profitable point. And what we find is actually that sometimes MR equals MC tells us that if profit's not happening there, that we should consider temporarily shutting down. And what we do is we compare how much are we losing at that MR equals MC value versus how much would we lose if we just shut down and produced 0 units. And if we just shut down and produced 0 units, the only cost that we would incur are the cost of the fixed resources, because we're not going to be hiring any employees. Now we're going to look at this later in the course, later in this unit actually, but right now this is the biggie, MR equals MC. So let's assume that Apex Oil sells each barrel of oil at $40. Its goal is to maximize profit. So here we've given the first few values for you. Now the 0th unit, right, they produce 0, they get total revenue 0, and the total cost we're going to say is $20. And that, that cost is going to happen even if they're not producing. So that is equal to essentially the cost of them just having oil rigs and having business, machinery and land. And so their profit, if they don't have any revenue, their total cost is 20, their profit's negative 20. If they produce 1 million barrels, right, then the 1 times 40 is the marginal revenue is also 40, but their total revenue is 40 because each barrel is 40. So 1 times the price gives you the total revenue, and the marginal revenue is the difference here, so that's 40. And the total cost, we'll say, went up to 25. That's because they had to pay some workers. So the marginal cost was 5, the marginal revenue was 40, so our profit was 15. Now, we could say, oh, okay, that's great, we're satisfied with 15, but we actually want to maximize profit, right? So let's produce the next unit. So 2, and then that gets us up to 2 times 40. 2 times 40 is 80, so the change is 40. And then costs go up a little bit more to 10, now 45. 40 is still bigger than 10. So let's produce the next unit. 3 times 40 is 120. The change is still 40. Here the change is 15, right? So total revenue 120 minus total cost is 70. Now you might be satisfied with that. Well, let's see. 160. Again, 4 times the price is 40. 160, so the change here is 40. Then we have the change in cost. 50 to 70 is 20. And 40 and 20, well, those aren't equal, but we do know we're still earning a profit here. 160 minus 70, that gives us 90. Right? Let's try the next one. 5 times 40 is 200. The change is 40. And then the change here is 30, right? 70 to 100. So now we get 100. 200 minus 100 is 100. All right, well, 40 is still not equal to 30. We're comparing MR to MC. 40 is still not equal, so let's produce the next one. 240, right? 6 times 40. And so the change is 40. Here, the change is 30 still. So the cost went up 30. And on this one, right, it's 240 minus 130. So we had 110 worth of profit. We should still keep going. 40 is not the same as 30. So 7 times that is 280, 40, and that's the change there. And the change here, 30, still not equal. 120 in profit. Profit's still going up. 8 times 4 is 320. The change is 40. The change here is 40. Oh boy, I bet we're going to maximize profit here. 40 and 40, those equal each other. 320 minus 200 is 120. And then if we produce, let's say we were like, all right, we could squeeze a little bit more out, right? Let's produce this 9th unit, 360. Let's see what happens. Marginal revenue is still 40. Marginal cost is 50. So the cost of producing that 9th unit was 50. The revenue was 40. So that means actually that we lost out by producing that unit. So the profit was 360 minus 250. That's only 110. So we should continue to produce until the quantity where MR equals MC. So we should produce at quantity 8. Now we could say, let's produce this one. Sure, we can do the math and find out what happens here. This one is also bad. This one is also bad as well. But we can find that there's one little piece here where it's a little confusing to students. Some students will say, but Mr. Glassinger, you could produce unit 7 and get 120. And you produce 8 and get 120. So what gives? Why wouldn't you just produce 7 and get 120? The rationale is that if you're given between these two choices, you'd want the one that gives you more market share. In addition, assuming that perhaps there's an incremental number of barrels of oil, like a 7.5 barrel of oil, then you would want to produce the 7.5 barrel of oil. You would want to keep producing actually until you get to this point. So 2 kind of quick explanations for that. One is the market share, and the other is that incrementally what you're actually trying to do is get closer and closer to these two values being equal. So the easier way, rather than like figuring out total revenue minus total cost and proving that profit was maximized here, was we could have just realized that marginal revenue equals the price, right? We could have just filled in that column. And then we could have just looked in the marginal costs and gone, okay, 15, 20, 30, 30, 30, 40, 50, 50. Oh, that's where it is. Like we could have just very quickly solved this and said that's the quantity that they should produce. So hopefully this helps you understand a little bit about how we maximize profit. We maximize it when we produce the quantity where MR equals MC.